Hook history remembers kings, wars, and speeches, but forgets the quiet hands that rebuilt broken streets and the soft hearts that held strangers together when the world fell apart. This is one of those lost stories, not of a hero with medals, but of an unwanted boy, a silent woman, and a family who helped shape modern Britain without anyone ever knowing their names. In a dusty London attic, hidden behind an old wooden trunk, a small brown suitcase rested in silence for decades. It did not look important, yet it carried a life the world had forgotten. When 19-year-old Emily found it, while helping her grandmother clean, she felt something strange, like the past was waiting. Inside were tied letters, black and white photographs, and a child's worn shoe. Nothing expensive, nothing famous, but every object felt heavy with meaning. Emily did not know it yet, but she was holding the story of people who helped rebuild a nation quietly, without recognition, without reward, without history ever saying thank you. One photo showed children standing on a crowded train platform during wartime evacuation. Smoke blurred the sky, and fear hid behind brave little smiles. Labels hung from their coats like they were parcels to be sent away. Emily's eyes stopped at one boy standing slightly apart. He held a small bag tightly, as if it contained his whole world. His expression was calm, but his eyes looked older than childhood allowed. On the back, faded ink, read Samuel Clark, age 12. Emily felt her chest tighten. She unfolded the first letter carefully, sensing she was stepping into someone else's pain. Samuel wrote about sirens screaming through London nights and shelter walls trembling with bombs. He described pretending to be brave so his mother would not worry. When evacuation came, people said it meant safety, but he wrote that it felt like being given away. At the countryside station, families chose children one by one. Younger ones first, cheerful ones next. Samuel stood straight, trying to look useful, trying to smile. Still, people's eyes passed him. He wrote that being left behind in a crowd hurt more than the bombs ever did. He began to believe nobody would choose him. Hours later, when the platform nearly emptied, an elderly woman stepped forward. She wore a plain dark coat and eyes full of quiet sorrow. She said he could come with her. That was all. No promises, no smiles, just quiet acceptance. Her name was Mrs. Turner, and her cottage stood at the edge of a windy village. The house smelled of wood smoke and old tea leaves. She gave him soup, showed him a small bed, and closed the door gently. That night, Samuel cried silently. Later, he felt an extra blanket placed over him. He wrote, she never hugged him, but never let him feel cold. Village life was not easy. Local boys laughed at his London accent, and some adults spoke as though he could not hear. Samuel worked long days on farms, carrying water and mending fences. His hands blistered, but the hard work tired his sadness. Evenings were different. Mrs. Turner sat by candlelight teaching him to read properly. She said learning was something war could never destroy. One winter night, she gave him her late son's wool scarf. She did not explain, and he did not ask, but he understood that gift meant he belonged in her home. A letter arrived weeks later with news that shattered him. His mother had died in a bombing. There would be no funeral, no goodbye, just ink on thin paper. Samuel walked into the fields and sat under gray skies for hours. Mrs. Turner found him there. She did not give speeches or empty comfort. She simply sat beside him, holding his shaking hand. He wrote that her silence saved him. That night, he promised himself he would live in a way that made his mother proud. Pain did not disappear, but it turned into quiet strength he carried forward. When war ended, Samuel returned to London as a young man. The city looked broken, buildings torn open like wounds. He joined rebuilding crews, lifting bricks and clearing rubble. Nobody asked about his past. He was just another worker with tired hands. Still, every wall he helped raise felt like healing something inside himself. He kept Mrs. Turner's scarf in his pocket, touching it when memories grew loud. He believed small acts mattered. Not speeches, not power, just steady hands rebuilding homes for families who had lost everything, just like he once had. In a hospital canteen one afternoon, Samuel met Aisha, a nurse who had come from overseas to help Britain's struggling system. She worked long hours and faced quiet stares in hallways. Samuel recognized that feeling of being seen but not fully accepted. They began sharing tea during short breaks, talking about families far away and futures they hoped to build. Their friendship grew gently into love. Evening walks became their peace after difficult days. Together, they dreamed of a country where no one would feel unwanted, a place where kindness mattered more than where someone came from. Finding housing proved difficult. Some doors closed quickly, excuses coming easily. Finally, they rented a tiny flat above a bakery where mornings smelled of fresh bread. They filled the space with second-hand furniture and soft laughter. Soon, neighbors began knocking for help. Someone needed letters read. Someone needed food. Someone just needed someone to listen. Their home became a quiet refuge. Samuel believed nations heal in living rooms before governments ever notice. They had little money, but their door stayed open. Kindness became their daily work, unpaid but deeply needed. They helped displaced families and immigrant workers settle into new lives. Aisha translated hospital forms and explained appointments. Samuel connected people with fair construction jobs. Evenings meant crowded tables and shared meals. No reporters came. No awards followed. Yet children returned to school. Parents found dignity, and loneliness slowly softened. Samuel believed this was real service. Unseen, ordinary, human. Britain was rebuilding not only through steel and brick, but through shared meals and open doors. Quiet love stitched together a country wounded by war, thread by thread. Their daughter was born on a rainy morning, her cry filling rooms that once held silence. Samuel held her with trembling hands, overwhelmed by fierce love. He whispered she would always belong. A son followed, bringing louder laughter. Life stayed hard, money tight, but joy lived everywhere. Samuel watched his children sleep, feeling old wounds inside him close slowly. They were living the safe childhood he never had. That alone felt like victory greater than any medal. Love, he learned, could rewrite the ending of even the loneliest beginnings. Samuel often visited Mrs. Turner, bringing bread and flowers. Age bent her back, but her eyes still shone warmly. One afternoon, she gave him the brown suitcase. She said his life was inside and should not be forgotten. He understood she was giving him responsibility, not objects. Before leaving, he hugged her gently. She smiled with quiet pride. Months later, news came of her passing. Samuel stood by her grave holding the scarf. He thanked her for choosing him when no one else did. That single choice had shaped generations after. Britain changed over the years. New buildings rose, new languages filled markets, new faces shaped streets. Samuel walked neighborhoods he had helped rebuild, watching children play where Rubel once lay. His own children moved through the city confidently, calling it home. That meant everything. His past pain never vanished, but it softened into understanding. It taught him to treat strangers with patience. He knew how easily someone could feel invisible, so he made sure no one around him ever felt that way again. Late at night, Samuel opened the suitcase and read the letters. Aisha sat beside him, listening. He said stories were bridges from pain to purpose. If stories disappeared, lessons vanished. So he began writing more, adding memories about survival and compassion. He wrote, not to be famous, but to leave light for someone lost in darkness. Aisha believed his story mattered. She had seen lives changed through small kindness. She placed fresh paper before him one evening, telling him someone someday would need these words. Years passed, turning his hair silver. He told grandchildren stories about courage and patience. He never spoke with bitterness, only understanding. He wanted the next generation to build a softer world. One evening, feeling weak, he placed a final letter in the suitcase. He wrote they had been there, had helped, had loved. His life began with rejection, but ended surrounded by belonging. He closed his eyes peacefully, family around him. A life once overlooked had quietly shaped many others. After his passing, Aisha could not open the suitcase again. Memories felt too close. She stored it in the attic of their daughter's home. Years slipped by, dust settling on the case. Inside, the letters waited patiently. History had not erased them, only paused them. Stories do not disappear. They wait for someone curious enough to listen. Decades later, Emily found it. She read with trembling hands, realizing her country was built not only by leaders, but by ordinary hearts like Samuel and Aisha. Emily closed the suitcase gently, tears in her eyes. She had never met them, yet felt connected. She understood now that history's loudest voices are not always the most important. Some of the greatest builders leave no statues behind, only lives made better. She promised their story would not return to silence. In that quiet attic, a forgotten chapter of history breathed again, ready to travel beyond time, reminding the world that love, not fame, is what truly builds nations.